subject, the best is yet to be. Must be. There can't be anything but better after you get one of these things. So I'm feeling good. It's got to be better. The best is yet to be. But I was noticing with the boys last night in Encinitas, they asked to meditate, and I hate to refuse them. It means so much to them, so we did. And in spite of all conditions, there, that great light of the one Christ consciousness, the great light, the spiritual light, the fields of white Christ consciousness were there. So God is usable or available under every condition. And once He gives you His love, He never takes it away. Realize that. Once God gives you His love, He never withdraws it. And that's the most beautiful thing. The Master used to say, then life is sweet and death is sweet when thy song flows through me. So realize that's the greatest thing. At the end of every year, we are apt to take account of stock and to see, that is, if we are wise, what causes we have laid up in the past year. Because those causes which we have laid up will greatly influence what happens in the coming year. If you have lived a meditative life, wherein you regularly contacted God, gave a little time for Him every day, then the coming year will be good. It cannot help but be good. But if you have lived a worldly life and have not thought much of God, you're going to reap the results of a worldly existence, and you cannot escape it. And so in taking this subject, the best is yet to be, we realize that there's something we are not doing. The very subject indicates that what we have is not complete, does it not? When we say the best is yet to be, then we haven't something that we need. We are not complete. We have not fulfillment. There is something lacking in us. And that is just what has happened. The elusive best, the best is yet to be, is none other than the presence of God's great consciousness right within you and within me. We are apt to look to the past and the future instead of looking toward to the eternal now. We look over past elusive happenings and also to future happenings instead of being taken up with the eternal now. And that eternal now is the presence of God within us. It is not subject to time. The beginning and the end and the continuity of things is our own emphasis of time. But in the eternal consciousness, that time element is nothing. 1,000 years in God's great consciousness is a moment. And so you see, we are making the mistake of being identified with past and future events. We take the results of past experiences and we superimpose those upon our consciousness that those things will happen in the future. When really, it is the eternal now we must know. God's great eternal consciousness is not subject to time. And if we can but realize and know that eternal consciousness, the eternal now, right now, then we will realize the best. The best is yet to be means that we as yet have not contacted that great eternal now consciousness of God. And therefore we're looking for it in the future. And really in His presence there's no past or future. or no continuity between those two. It's God alone, His great consciousness, His great love. And so let us realize the very fact that we take this title, the best is yet to be, it means that there's something we haven't got. There's something we need. And that something is God's eternal consciousness. Having that, we will not live in the past like many people do, bringing up old happenings. Or we will not hope for the future. Things will be better. We'll get it right now. Right now we can have it. We can have that eternal now consciousness, which is God's presence within us. When we still the movements of past and future experiences, then we can become aware of God's presence as His glorious omniscience. But as long as you are living in the past and the future, you cannot be aware of God's omniscience, because they do not go together. God's omniscience is complete. And when we're dwelling in past and future experiences, we are not complete. We're in the outward consciousness, or as Master used to say, the dream consciousness. The dream consciousness in which we do not find fulfillment. But if we offset these things, if we rise above this duality of consciousness and stop living in the dream consciousness, then we can become aware of the omniscience of God. Having that, we have all things. Now, that we are in the grip of this cosmic dream consciousness, Jesus was well aware, because He said in St. John, the 16th chapter, the 33rd verse, He was well aware that we were living in this past and future state of consciousness. That's the dream consciousness. This dream goes on because of the past happenings and the things that are going to happen in the future. Now, Jesus was aware of that, for He said in that verse these words, "In the world ye shall have tribulation." In the consciousness, duality of consciousness, this worldly consciousness, we can all agree that we will have and do have tribulation. But He didn't stop there. He said in the last part of the verse, "Be of good cheer." And He might have said, the best is yet to be. Be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. Now, what did He mean? He simply meant, although His body was born into this cosmic dream consciousness, and although He suffered tribulations and will as long as He had that particular body as you and I will, He realized that He had overcome. He had risen above the cosmic dream consciousness of this duality, and He had made dynamic to His consciousness the eternal now of God's omniscience. Be of good cheer. Just like Jesus said about the harvest. Don't think you have to wait 4 months, it's there. And so don't think you have to wait for another year or two or several years. The best is right there with you now. As Jesus said, be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. Overcome worldly consciousness. Now we have the same thing in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 27th line of the 7th discourse, when it says the same thing, in little different words, it says, all men walk the earth wholly deluded. Well, they're in the dream consciousness, that's all, because that consciousness is not stable, that consciousness is not eternal, that consciousness passes away, so all men are born into that. All men walk the earth wholly deluded, and I'm sure we all can vouch for that. There is no security no permanency in this outward consciousness. But then the Gita goes on to say, get out of my delusion, O Arjuna. Get out of it. Why be wholly deluded for this life and perhaps other lives? Why not get out of it? The best is yet to be. When you get out of it, then you will know that best which is God's omniscience, right within each and every one of us. Now Jesus pointed the way. Jesus pointed the way as to being relieved from this outward consciousness, which is so engulfing, so darkening. For he said these words, my kingdom is not of this world. What did he mean? My kingdom is not of this world. He meant that the kingdom wherein we will find fulfillment, wherein we'll find the best, is not in outward consciousness, but it is in the eternal consciousness of God within each and every one of us. It is the eternal now, not what has happened in the past, not what may happen in the future, but right now. So we must grasp that. Jesus pointed the way. My kingdom is not of this worldly consciousness in which we find past and future happenings. My kingdom is in the eternal now consciousness, the omniscience of God, in which we find all fulfillment. The underlying stable consciousness, that doesn't oscillate. When you get up in the morning, you go about your work, it isn't long before somebody has upset you. Why? Because you're not in that stable consciousness of the presence of God. He who is fixed in me, I keep him in perfect peace. He whose mind is stayed in me. That's the stable consciousness underlying the unreality of this cosmic dream. That's what we must know. That's what we must attain, and that is what we can attain if we will. And so, we should set our spiritual course for 1957 to make our own the eternal now of God's presence. We should set our course to do those things which will keep us in the eternal now and will not push us hither and yon in this outward, unstable, unsatisfying consciousness of this cosmic dream. We should do that. Then the best will be. And because we have not that with us right now, it shows that we must attain it. We must realize that God's omniscience is our own consciousness. God's all-pervading consciousness, his ever-attentive consciousness, is his ever-understanding consciousness. His ever-loving consciousness is right with us now. That's the eternal now. And we must make that our own, and we must set our course in 57 that we attain that we realize that. Now, we have a certain automatic way in which we can keep our course toward the omniscience of God. By merging in the holy vibration within, by regular meditation, we are bound, without question of a doubt, to keep our consciousness in the eternal now of God. We have what you might call an automatic pilot. An automatic pilot that will keep you on the course to the eternal now consciousness of God's presence within you. And if you put your ship, so to speak, of consciousness on that automatic pilot, you will, without question of a doubt, reach that eternal now of God's oneness with you. There'll be no separation between you and his great omniscience. And then you'll know, thou and I, O Father, never apart. Thou and I, never apart. Now what is that automatic pilot? What is that automatic pilot? It is none other than regular, the practice of regular scientific meditation. That's all. You thought it was going to be something different, didn't you? It isn't. But if you do that, if you regularly meditate morning and night, give a little time each day to God, and especially if you do Kriya Yoga, you'll be automatically taken into the presence of the eternal now of God. Because in St. John, the first chapter, the first verse, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. What is the Word? The holy vibration, the great cosmic sound, the great eternal light which is all-pervading, greatest of all, God's love in your heart. That's the Word. Regular, scientific meditation will keep you in that Word. Well, if that Word is God, God's great consciousness moved, produced the great cosmic vibration, the intelligent cosmic vibration. If your scientific meditation keeps you in that vibration, how can you miss the eternal now of God's presence? You can't. Now that's the automatic pilot. But you say, well, you know how it is. I have so many things to do. And the relatives come and the babies howl and this. All right. You don't get God, that's all. You don't attain that eternal now of God's presence. But we must do that. We must. Regularly. Just regularly, that's all. As the Master used to say, isn't God worth 1 hour out of the 24? Isn't to know He's with you. To know that He loves you and will never leave you and never withdraw His love. Isn't that worth it? Isn't that worth 1 hour out of the 24? Think of it. Think of it. Master has said. And I know devotees who have found that God, once He gives you His love, will never take it away. Isn't that worth 1 hour out of the 24? Certainly it is. So the automatic pilot is regular, scientific meditation where we keep our consciousness in the eternal now presence of God. Now, not, oh, we'll do it tomorrow, we'll do it next week. When I get over this difficulty, then I'm going to begin to meditate. I've listened to them. They never start. They're always going to. As Master used to say, the road to, where is it? Hades is paved with good intentions. But we must do that. We must realize that. And so this automatic pilot will keep us. Realize that. Will keep you in the eternal now consciousness of God. How can you fail? How can you fail? You can't. Because Master told me, and I remember distinctly, he said, Doctor, when you're in the holy vibration, no force in the universe can touch you. No force in the universe can disturb you. What does that simply mean? It means to keep your consciousness, your awareness in the holy vibration by regular meditation. And if some emergency comes up, you lift your consciousness to the Christ center. And immediately you're in the eternal now of God's presence. Why wait? Why wait till next week? Why think of the things that have happened in the past when you had lots of money or this and that? What of it? What have you got now? That's the way to look at it. And the moment you can lift your consciousness, realize this now, The moment you can lift your consciousness to this point and hold it there without oscillation, without the thoughts coming in and disturbing you, without the deep emotions ruffling your being, when you can keep your consciousness there, you have the eternal now of God's presence. Right then! I have told you many times I was out in a storm, a very severe storm, and it looked hopeless. It looked as if the end had arrived. And I remembered Master's words. When you're in the Om vibration, nothing can touch you. What did I do? I looked there. I looked there with all my strength because I was in a tight spot. And the great light of the infinite came. And we were rescued. We were saved. Why? Because in God's eternal now, how can God's consciousness be hurt or disturbed or killed or anything else? It cannot. Don't you understand? God's consciousness always was and will be. It's a fact we stay in the outward consciousness that causes us all the trouble. And so I lifted my consciousness there. And His great omniscience came and took care of things. These are facts. These are experiences. They're not just imaginations. Then I realized how thankful I was that I had found the channel of God. Because the true channel of God watches the disciple, watches the devotee. Nothing can ever happen to him. I knew he watched because later I found out. When I returned home from that episode, telephone rang just as I got in. The Master said, "You came near getting wet, didn't you?" I said, "Yes." "How'd you know?" Quiet. But later I found at precisely that time. He was sitting with a lady in her parlor, reading Emerson's essay on the sea. And she said he threw the book down and jumped up, walked back and forth and said, "Sister, the doctor's in trouble, I tell you, serious trouble." At precisely that moment when I was out in the storm. Why? Because the Master was in the eternal now consciousness of God. His great omniscience was there. That's the same omniscience that will protect each and every one of us if we really are true to God. Then I got hold of him and said, "How about it? Did you see it or didn't you?" He says, "Yes, I saw it." 5 years later, before he said a word about it, such is the humbleness of those who are one with God's omniscience. And so realize that best is yet to be means that when you so realize the importance of what you're doing, that you'll give time for God and can lift your consciousness to His presence here at will, you have the eternal now consciousness of God, and you have the protection of the Master of the universe. Realize these things. That's why a true guru is so important, because he's a true channel of God. And so, in conclusion, the Bible, Isaiah the 30th chapter, the 20th and 21st verses, something wonderful to remember at the end of this year, where we read as follows in Isaiah, "And though the Lord give you bread of adversity," well, He does, because He created this dream, and when you're in it, you get adversity. And so it says, "And though the Lord give you the bread of adversity and the water of affliction, yet shall not thy teachers be removed into a corner anymore." You have the presence of God right here. You don't have to have a teacher in the ordinary sense of the word. God's presence is right there. It's not removed from you. And so it says, "Yet shall not thy teachers be removed into a corner anymore, but thine eyes shall see thy teachers." What's the matter with us? We don't know that eternal now consciousness of God. If we knew that, His great omniscient light is there to guide us every moment. For it goes on to say these beautiful words, and thine eyes, and thine ears, rather, shall hear a word behind thee. The great cosmic sound. Thine ears shall hear a word behind thee, saying, this is the way. Walk ye in it, when you turn to the right hand, and when you turn to the left. If you will but merge in that word, that omniscience of God right within you, then you'll be guided when you turn to the left and when you turn to the right. And when you do that, then the best will not be yet to be. The best will be with you. Right then and right now, the eternal now consciousness of God is with us. And realize, if you can once attain that, I cannot emphasize this too much, if you can once attain that presence of God within you at this point, and you can feel His omniscient love, and you know He will never withdraw it, there's nothing that will equal that eternal now presence of God's great omniscience, in which you will find His great love.